breaking down revenue drivers. So this is probably one of the most important principles that we have to use in financial modeling. The more you split, the more persuasive your model gets. Let's say that we've forecasted revenue for the next 5 years simply because the past historicals revenue grew twice. So we are assuming that revenue grows twice just once again, and it reaches $400. Compared to the single line model, let's say that we have split up our model just once. And now we have revenue for Botox and revenue for fillers. The fillers didn't show any revenue growth for the past 5 years, so we're assuming that fillers stays the same with no growth for the next 5 years, so it stays at 50. But for Botox, we witnessed a growth for the past 5 years, and we are also assuming some more growth for the next 5 years, reaching 350. These two combined creates $400 in revenue. And if we compare it to the single line model that we did before, just think about how much story it creates, how much logic it creates, just by splitting the revenue driver just once. If you do it once again, probably price times quantity, we can see for Botox, the price levels just remain the same. So we also estimate that it's going to remain the same level for the next 5 years. For quantity, yes, the revenue was driven mainly by quantity. So later on, it's still going to grow, and we will have our reasons for why quantity grew so much for the next 5 years. And 35 times 10 equals 350. So thus the revenue for Botox. For fillers, a completely different story. Price is declining, probably due to maybe increased competition, let's say, but quantity still grew. So despite quantity growing due to decreases in price, filler revenue stayed the same and will stay the same in the future as well. As a result, 350 plus 50 will equal $400 in revenue. So just by splitting the revenue drivers, it creates a lot of story. And how you split the revenue drivers are really important. So we're going to see that in a moment, but there are so many ways that you can split revenue, or in other cases, maybe we have to split market size, and there are so many ways that we can do it. And depending on how we split it, it creates each individual storyline to it. And what an analyst, banker, or consultant does in the framing stage of the financial modeling is trying to figure out which storyline suits us the best. We have to consider the data availability. We have to consider our client's intents or things like those. And it not only applies to revenue, but when we're doing forecasts for cost of goods sold or other operating expenses, capital expenditures, depreciation, whatever important account that you try to forecast, it's better that you split up the drivers. But if it's not important, if it's for, let's say, other current asset items, we don't consider that important. So if that's the case, we don't have to split it further. We just, let it stay as one. But when it's important, we recommend that you split the drivers. So let's see some of the examples of revenue breakdowns. These are just simple examples that we see. The most common breakdown that we see is breaking down revenue by product or by service or by business segment. So for example, Johnson & Johnson, it's a huge conglomerate, and it does operate in very different business segments. So they've divided revenue into consumer products and pharma products, and this is actually how they've expressed it in their annual reports. And their consumer products again into skin health, oral care, baby care. Their pharma products into their types of drugs. Another common cut is by geography. So when the company is operating in many countries, we often split our revenue into geographies. For example, Netflix works in many countries, so we have the revenue split down for the US, so North America, EMEA, Latin America, and Asian Pacific. And then they further divide it into product types. So we can see that sometimes we use a combination of these breakdown methodologies. Also, some companies, the distribution channels are very important. So for example, Japanese skincare company called Shiseido, they split revenue by distribution channel, by sales channel, and the big breakdown is by offline channels and online channels, and they go further on to splitting to duty-free, department stores, brand stores, and other offline channels. And of course, by customer type as well. So when products are offered to different customer types, one of the main breakdowns would be, are they selling to the customers or are they selling to business? So in other words, B2C versus B2B. And for the case of MGM Resorts International, if you have been to Las Vegas or Macau, there's a huge casino hotel that's named MGM. And they first divide revenue into geography segments, but in the end, they divide their customers to VIP or just ordinary, normal people who come to gamble. They do this because their behaviors are very, very different. Especially what's different is how much they spend per person is very different. So we don't want to blend them because the average spending per person would be very distorted. So we want to see them split VIPs and the ordinary people. And even when you're doing the financial modeling, we want to model VIPs and other customers separately. Of course, there are other types of breakdowns, but we think that these four are the most common. And as I mentioned before, there could be combinations of these breakdowns. And a single company could have different approaches to breakdowns. So if you want to create a financial model on your own, if you're preparing for a modeling test or working and analyzing a single company, it's very important to consider how you're going to break down, especially revenue. In our financial model, we are going to break down sales into 3 layers. So number 1, by product type. So we're going to split revenue by number 1, Botox, number 2, fillers, and others, which would be mainly the cosmetics products. And then we're going to split it once again into geographic regions, so sales regions. So we have US, we have Asia Pacific, we have rest of the world, and then further on to price times quantity. And we can see that for other products, the cosmetics products, we're not gonna split it further just because it's not very important and it's not worth it to split it and give analysis to it. So we're going to keep the other segment relatively simple, but we're going to put in a lot of effort into forecasting Botox and filler products. So remember this model structure, and let's go to our Excel spreadsheet and structure our financial model.